Is this a great game or what? With the Hall of Famer Tim Kurkjian. I'm his son, Jeff Kurkjian. And today, Cubs broadcaster Jim Deshaies, former Major League pitcher, is joining as our guest.
And he made us laugh so many times about the Andy Griffith Show, about what a terrible hitting pitcher he was. And he struck out the first 8 batters of a game, first guy in the modern era to do that. He got a Hall of Fame vote. Jim Deshaies covered a lot of ground with us today, and all of it was hilarious. Our special guest this week is my dear friend Jim Deshaies, former Major League pitcher, former really good Major League pitcher, and now the color broadcaster, color analyst on Cubs games with our dear friend Boog Sciambi. Jim, this is my son Jeff. We do a podcast together.
Yeah, how about that? Hi, Jeff. Hi, Tim. How are you,
Good.
fellas?
All right, Jim, before we get to the Cubs, before we get to baseball, you are from Messina, New York. I know all about this. Can you explain another one of the famous people who's from Messina, New York, at least in sitcom history?
Yeah, perhaps the most famous Messinian ever, if a Messinian is even a word. It's the great Hal Smith, who had a long career in Hollywood and radio, but most well known as Otis the Drunk on the Andy Griffith Show. People of a certain age will remember the lovable drunk Otis, who used to lock himself up in the jail cell. And we got to be buddies many, many years ago when I was playing for the Astros.
That's amazing. Now, Jim, tell us about the little ceremony that they had on the field with you in uniform from, help me here, the Andy Griffith Show fan club. Tell that
There's a
story.
fan club these fan clubs, they apparently they popped up all over the place back in the day, and they may still exist for all I know. But so I'll try to get to that point initially, how I even got to know Hal Smith. It might have been Rod Beaton. Somebody's doing an article and asked me, because Messina's a small town in northern New York, if I were like the most famous guy from there, and I said no, it's Hal Smith, who played Otis the Drunk, and somehow somebody sent Hal that article. And he called the clubhouse looking for me, and that's how this relationship started. And we ended up chatting. I met him in L.A. We were out to play the Dodgers, and my wife and then 2 of my daughters were little, and they were with us on the trip. And we met and had breakfast with Otis, Hal. And the great thing was, we're sitting in the restaurant, the hotel, and he sees us as he's crossing the lobby. And as soon as he sees us, he just starts staggering and doing the drunk Otis walk and immediately breaks into character. And he was delightful. He sat at the table. He voiced Winnie the Pooh for years, so he did Winnie the Pooh for the girls, and that blew them away. And he did a bunch of other stuff. So anyway, that got to be a thing. And Otis and I would connect every now and then. And we had this clubhouse guy in Houston, Buck Kincaid. For all I know, he's still there. Buck loved Andy and Mayberry and the whole deal. So he said, can I talk? And they developed a better friendship than I had. He would call Hal like once a week from the clubhouse, and they'd catch up on all things baseball and Andy Griffith. He got the dirt on Aunt Bee, and he got the dirt on Helen Crump, and who was nice on the set and who wasn't. And yeah, so they had this long-lasting relationship. And at some point along the way, while I was still playing, the Andy Griffith fan club decided to do something at the ballpark and honor Hal.
And who was there that day? Wasn't there a Barney Fife impersonator?
Yeah,
and didn't you get some present from the woman who looked like Aunt Bee?
I know I got a signed picture of Otis riding a donkey, in Mayberry, in character. I can't remember who was there, Tim, to tell you the truth. I don't remember who all the characters were at that time, but yeah, there had to have been a Barney impersonator.
Right, but Jim, when Hal Smith called you in the clubhouse that day, did he introduce himself? How did he introduce himself?
Yeah, as Hal, and then I think he immediately jumped to that. I saw that you mentioned me in the article, and I thought that was really neat. And I just wanted to call and reach out and say hi. And so I'm a big fan. He goes, well, I'm a fan of yours too. I'm sure he had, until he'd seen that article, he probably had no idea, because he had long gone from Messina. He left as a kid to pursue his acting career. Yeah, that was a fun little little episode.
Yeah,
Hal Smith.
calls to the clubhouse for our younger generation. That's like today's sliding into DMs, right? That's like hitting somebody up on Instagram and being like, "Hey, Jim, saw your post. Would love to chat with you sometime."
Yeah.
That's so cool that he called the clubhouse and wanted to reach out. That's special.
Yeah. And I was gobsmacked. It's Hal Smith. It's Otis the Drunk. In my world, my brain, that's a big time star right there.
And it was a big time note for me to get into Sports Illustrated that here Jim Deshaies in uniform is accepting like an honorary membership to the Andy of May. So I send this in, and Peter Carey, who was number 2 in charge at Sports Illustrated while I was there, Jim, he looks at the note and he goes, I don't understand this. I've never seen this show. No one has ever seen this show. Andy Griffith Show, and a bunch of editors had to come in and say, Peter, everyone has seen the show. How could you have never seen it? So they finally decided to put it in the magazine. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because my dad is currently in a nursing home up there in Messina. He's 92 years old. And I spent a bunch of the off season up there and spent a lot of hours in the nursing home. And lo and behold, there was a lot of gun smoke and then the Andy Griffith Show being watched in room 104 at the Highland Nursing Home.
Well, Jim, this is not my observation. I heard it somewhere else, but I still get a kick out of it that everyone in the Andy Griffith Show is single. Thelma Lou, Andy, Barney, Floyd the Barber, Gomer, Goober, they're all single except for Otis the Drunk, and he's drunk every night.
The secret to a happy life.
He spends every night in jail, and he's the only one who's married.
He's the only one living a full life. Yeah, the rest of them are bitter and lonely, sad.
Oh, God.
Jim, so my longtime co-host, so I'm a country music morning show host now in Philadelphia. I did Vegas morning show radio for a long time, and one of my closest friends in the whole world is from Ogdensburg, New York.
Oh, nice.
Not too far from Messina, New York. For those who don't know, that is truly upstate New York, okay? Like, I went to Syracuse University, and I say, I went to school in upstate New York. No. That is central New York to New Yorkers. And when you talk Messina and you talk Ogdensburg, as my friend so kindly said, I grew up in Canada.
Yeah, it's the North Country.
Right.
We like to say God's country, but yeah, not upstate, the North Country, and it's very quiet, it's very rural. Ogdensburg, they were our bitter rivals back in the day, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, she went to Ogdensburg Free Academy, Dad. She was a great swimmer, and she would actually swim the St. Lawrence River. Is that what's up there, right?
That's absolutely what's up there.
Swim into Canada and back. That was her practices.
What a gamer, yeah.
Now, Jim, speaking of upstate New York, Jeffrey went to Syracuse. He's wearing his Syracuse shirt. You went to Lemoyne College. Tell us the story behind going there.
Yeah, well, Lemoyne's like the varsity, and Syracuse is the JV, right? In Syracuse, New York. I went to Lemoyne. When I came out of high school, I was drafted by the Expos, 13th round, 12th round, something like that. And it's funny because at the time, college baseball wasn't as big as it is now, and guys weren't as heavily recruited in northern New York as somebody might be now who was in the draft. So I was actually drafted by the Expos, but had very little contact with any colleges. So it came down to Cornell or Lemoyne. Lemoyne had a really good Division II program. Cornell was Cornell, so there was obviously advantages to that. And it's funny, when I went to visit Cornell, it was a beautiful spring day. The campus was buzzing. The coach was a fellow by the name of Ted Thorne, and he gave me this whole pitch. The 4 years you're here, our spring trips will be California, Hawaii, Japan, and Hawaii again. So, wow, that's impressive. He goes, you'll put on a Cornell blazer, you'll go to these meet and greets, and you'll get up and talk, and you'll network with all these, people, very successful people. I went to Lemoyne College, and I met Dick Rockwell, who had a minor league playing career and then a long career coaching, one of the winningest coaches in college baseball history. And Rock, as we call him, was sitting at his desk with a Folgers coffee can and a big chew-in, spitting into it on a gray, drizzly, ugly day on a tiny campus with not a soul walking about. And I was like, this is the place for me. This is where I want to be. So I ended up at Lemoyne, and the great part of it is I ended up being teammates with Tom Browning there. who went on to have a very successful major league career. And Tommy and I were rivals in high school up there in the North Country. He pitched in Malone. Your friend will know about Malone, your partner. So Tom and I actually had initially committed to Cornell. And when I said no to Lemoyne, Rockwell went and got Browning, and then I changed my mind and circled back. So Tom and I ended up being teammates at Lemoyne for 3 years, and we went to the Division II World Series a couple of times. So it was a pretty good run for a very small baseball school.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and as I've been told, like going from Ogdensburg or Messina to Central New York is like basically going to New York City at that point, because it's like when they would take trips to Syracuse, it was like a big deal. Here we go, going to the big city.
Absolutely, man. Hey, the first time I drove on that 690 loop, I said, "What is going on, mayhem?" Yeah, it was intimidating.
So, Jim, you brought up obviously your very good major league career, and you were the first. And Dad, fact check me on this. Make sure I have this right. The very first pitcher to retire, to strike out the first 8 batters of a game back in 1986. Do I have that right, Dad?
I believe, although I've seen differing reports. I think Jim Deshaies is the first pitcher ever to strike out the first 8 batters of the game. What is your? Am I right about that, Jim?
Well, you're mostly right about that. I was the first in the modern era to do it.
All right.
You'll recognize the name Mickey Welch,
of course,
from in the Wayback
Hall
Machine.
of Famer.
I believe Mickey Welch. Yeah, I believe Mickey Welch struck out 9 in a row to start a game, pitching either for or against the Cleveland Spiders. And I always claim that you can't have a record when the opponent or your team is the Cleveland Spiders, because nobody knows who they are. So I clung to that little bit of history, and it's since been tied a couple times, and then ultimately surpassed. Pablo Lopez, I think, has 9. But you probably know the story. I've probably told you the story of how that sequence of games.
Yes, tell us.
In
I
Houston.
know it, but tell Jeff, he doesn't know.
Yeah. So this was kind of fun. So we were picked probably by most, and probably by your publication too, Tim, to finish 5th that year in the NL West. But we had one of those magical years where we got contributions from a lot of guys we didn't expect to have. So we're coming down to the wire, and we're going to win the division. It's late in the year. It's late September, and I'd been actually on the shelf for a little bit, missed a start or 2 with tender elbow. Anyway, I'm starting against the Dodgers. I strike out the first 8 guys. They were probably hungover, disinterested. I don't know. Somebody in the center field probably was flashing a light in their eyes. But anyway, I strike out the first 8 guys. Ended up pitching a 2-hit shutout. And the next night, Nolan Ryan pitches. Nolan pitches 8 innings of 1-hit ball and strikes out 14. So after the game, I'm in the clubhouse and I'm shaving, and I'm next to Alan Ashby, our catcher. And I said, Ash, Nolan's got to do that, right? I mean, this is my shining moment, my one shining moment. He's got a billion of them. Could he not, does he have to come out here and show me up? And Ash says, I got a feeling Scotty, referring to Mike Scott, is going to show you both up. And the next day, Mike comes out and throws a no-hitter to beat the Giants, and that clinched the division. So we go 2-hitter, 1-hitter, no-hitter on successive days to clinch the division in '86.
So, Jim,
And Ashby predicted it. I mean, because when you say, I think he's going to show you both up, there's nothing but a no-hitter that's going to beat the 1-hit 14 strikeout game.
So first guy in modern history to strike out the first 8, and you were like 3rd on the totem pole for those 3 starts.
Yeah, you barely get a bronze. It's like an afterthought.
Yeah, they forgot about you by the Sunday notes. At that point.
It's like, yeah.
Now, Jim, do you remember the 8 straight Dodgers that you struck out? You can't do that after all these years, can you?
No. Steve Sachs was the lead off. I remember that. Reggie Williams was in there somewhere.
He hit second.
Pedro Guerrero.
He hit 4th.
Was
Enos hit third. Enos Cabell hit 3rd.
Reggie Williams, did I mention him?
He hit 2nd. So you got the first 4.
Dave Anderson?
Dave Anderson hit 7th. Way to go, Jim. This is really impressive.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
Alex Trevino was the catcher. He hit 5th. The third baseman.
Alex was swinging anything.
All right, I'm not going to quiz you anymore. Jeff Hamilton hit 6th.
Jeff Hamilton.
And then Jose Gonzalez hit 8th,
Yeah.
and they pinch hit for the pitcher. And do you remember who the pinch hitter was?
Oh yeah, I sure do. Larry
Right.
C.
Jeff,
Yeah, he popped up to second base on a 2-2
exactly.
pitch.
Look at this. It was 1986. Jim had a chance to strike out the first 9 batters of a game, and you got 7 of the 9 right. That is so cool.
Yeah. Well, when you, like, again, one shining moment, you're going to cling to it. So, I just every night I go to bed and I look at that lineup card and go, man, wasn't I something?
Now, Jim, another distinction that you had, and help me with this, is you threw over to first base like more than any pitcher, like in a season. I'm going to be wrong on this, but I'm going to be semi-close that you once threw to first base like 337 times and pick off. Have I got that right? Am I close to that? Am I in the ballpark with that?
Yes, it's in the 300s. It's in the 300s. Yeah. Well, a lot of base runners, a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. And Jim, in Montreal, I remember when anyone would throw over, wouldn't they put like a chicken up on the scoreboard, like you're such a chicken you won't even throw it to the plate? Am I right about that?
Yes, and you think about that old scoreboard at Olympic Stadium. It was not the modern graphics we have today. So it was these little yellow light bulb chickens that would they play the chicken noise, and they'd move across the screen, and then they kind of hang there from like a clothesline, is what I recall. And me being just a little bit of a contrarian, I said, "Oh, you want chickens? You're going to get chickens." So I just kept going. I'm like, to hell with the game. Who cares what's happening in the game? I'm going for the chicken record. And I think I got maybe 16 of them. I mean, I think I think I threw up a lot of chickens, and I had to be so annoying to play behind right when that was going on. I didn't even think about that back then, but I'm as a broadcaster now watching, oh my God.
Jeff, Steve Traxel was the slowest worker ever. And once Mark Grace screamed at him, "Pitt, throw the ball where it's hot out here." And he was on his team. He was the first baseman. He was yelling at his own pitcher. So, Jim, no one yelled at you on your team for throwing over to first?
I would imagine they talked behind my back. They probably went to the manager. Is there anything we can do about this guy? But they were too professional. Nobody wants to interfere with anybody else's what they're doing out there. They probably should have. And I think Chris Welsh may have made a run at that record too. I think Chris threw over there a bunch. Chris, not my single season, but my chickens.
Jeff,
which I hold more
Chris
dear.
Welsh, another soft-throwing left-hander like Jim. Although Jim Deshaies threw harder than Chris Welsh, but both of them were successful pitchers. Jim really successful. And Jim, you got a vote for the Hall of Fame. Would you please explain that whole story?
Shameless campaigning. And a columnist who needed a column. No, so here's how that went down. I didn't even know I was eligible, but apparently, if you play parts of 10 Major League, whatever that criteria is, parts of 10 Major League seasons, you're on the ballot. And every year, when they put the ballot out, you'll see the voting, and there's always guys who get no votes. So when somebody brought it to my attention on a radio interview, "Hey, you're on this Hall of Fame ballot," and I said, "Really?" And I said, I just want to get one vote. I don't want to get shut out. I know I'm not a Hall of Fame, not even close, but I'd like to get a vote. That would be fun. So Chuck Poole, who was in our media relations department back then, and the Sanders twins, they were also working for the Astros at the time. They decided to start a campaign on my behalf. They called me and they asked me, "Do we have permission? This is all going to be tongue in cheek. We're going to have fun." They called it "One Man, One Vote." They set up a website, and they really went to town promoting it. And John Lopez, who wrote for the Houston Chronicle at the time, John ended up writing a column in which he said he either had already voted for me or was going to vote for me, but he supported it by saying Jim Deshaies represents kind of like every man, we all dreamed about being a big league ball player. We all wanted to get there, have fun with it. He's not a real Hall of Famer, but I want to give him one vote to just because in his mind, I represented the mainstream or the body of major league players who never, would ever reach that level. So I got the one vote, and it got a fair bit of attention. Some people got the joke. Some people were really offended by it. But I just had this. My biggest fear was in starting this campaign that a whole bunch of you writers would go, well, I'm going to be the guy that gives them a vote. And all of a sudden I would get enough votes. And then I go, oh my God, now what do I do?
Now, Jim, do you have like a memento of John Lopez's column? Is it framed somewhere? Do you have the voting somewhere framed in your house? You got to vote for the hall.
I do not. It's probably the column's probably in a box somewhere with other scrapbook type memorabilia. My neighbors in Houston at the time, they came walking down the street with balloons and confetti, and so yeah, we had some fun.
Oh, that's so good. All right, so Jim, you were a terrible hitting pitcher. We're not going to hide the fact here. You hit 088 in your career. You've laughed about this many times with me. Just explain your troubles at the plate in the big leagues. I know the pitching is like no one's ever seen anything like that before. Explain.
Yeah, well, lack of speed, lack of power were two big pieces of my skill set. When I really hit the ball hard, it was usually over the third base dugout. I was a left-handed hitter, and even I remember when Yogi was coaching. Yogi Berra was our coach for a time in Houston, and I was taking BP. I think it was in Shea Stadium one day, and I'm like, popping it up into the cage and hitting little. And Yogi, the sweetest man on earth, he just goes shaking his head, "Get the hell out of there!" He just basically ran me out of the cage during BP. I was the starting pitcher that night. He's like, "You're supposed to be pumping me up, Yogi." But yeah, I have the record for most at bats without an extra base hit.
Right.
That's mine. Now that we have DH in both leagues, that'll be mine forever, unless there's a rule change. I came close. I feel like in my heart, I came close once or twice because I hit a little roller right down the third base line and it would kind of trickle into left field. But head down running, I wasn't smart enough to think I was just, pumping my legs and so I was like halfway to right field by the time I realized that the third baseman didn't field the ball. And then maybe the biggest highlight of my hitting career is in spring training. One time I hit a ground ball to second base off Ramon Martinez, and that might be the only time I ever pulled the ball against a big league pitcher. So that was like, that felt really cool. It felt like a normal hitter kind of out.
And Jeff, Ramon is Pedro Martinez's brother, and he was almost as filthy as his brother when it came to great stuff. And Jim Deshaies pulled a ground ball against Ramon Martinez. That's pretty impressive.
I turned him around. It's probably a changeup. But...
And the closest you ever came to hitting a home run, Jim, in the big leagues, anything even close?
No, I'd never hit a home run in batting practice. No, I mean, I will say in my defense, 1992, I spent half a year with the Padres, and Jimmy Snyder was the coach there, and he worked us pretty good. He'd get us into the cage like the day before you were to start, and he'd throw you some good BP with, and I felt like I swung the bat pretty well that year. I got a couple hits. I had 1 year where I got 9 hits, and on the final day of the year, I had a bet against Mike Scott that I would get 10. And I hit a pretty decent line drive to left field. And I think Joel Youngblood was left fielder for an out. So I didn't get my 10th hit. But I also had a year, I think I went 2 for 52 one year. Yeah. Which, I mean, come on. I could probably go 2 for 52 right now.
Well, Jim, you may have gone 2 for 52, but you also were able to draw a decent amount of walks.
Jim, you walked 23 times with an 088 average. That's pretty impressive, isn't it?
I think early, one of my first games, I drew a bases loaded walk against David Palmer and drove in a run. And I think he got released like the day after, and which I felt like, so that's on me. I think that was my fault. But it wasn't like I had this great eye and I was working at bats. I probably fouled a couple pitches off and just, happened to end up walking. Wasn't my plan.
Jim, I've said many times though, hitting in the big leagues and hitting in high school is a completely different thing. They have nothing in common. Were you a good hitter in high school, or were you not even a great hitter in high school?
I was, I hit in the middle of the batting
Right.
order in high school. I probably hit for a good average. My claim to fame is I hit a home run off my good buddy Tom Browning, future major leaguer. Again, comes with some context. Sinking line drive to the left field that the left fielder misplays, and it roll no fence. This is northern New York. The ball rolls down a hill, so I had to leg out the. I had to leg, so the left fielder's like fighting cows for it to get the ball to throw it back in, and I circled the bases. So, but that was always my claim to fame, because Tommy and I we had a fun rivalry with that stuff.
Jim, I was a little league umpire, and some of my favorite things that I had to do was establish ground rules. And I feel like I umpired at so many ballparks. Okay, if it hits the stream that's only 100 yards in right field, it's an automatic double. If it hits the house in center, it's a trip. Like, we had to come up with the most obscure rules just so we could play Little League Baseball. And that sounds like one of those rules. If it's down the hill.
Yeah, it was like when you're playing, kids and playing, hitting a tennis ball up against the school, and if it hits this high on the wall, it's a double. If it hits this high, it's a
Right.
triple. And yeah, one of those deals. We had a team in college. I don't know if it was Kutztown State, some school in Pennsylvania, where the baseball field backed onto the football field, and it was so short to right field, like from the foul pole to right center, you could hit it 600 feet, and it's going to be a double because it was so short to begin with. It was like 180, and then it would flare out. So if you hit it out that way, it was a legitimate home run. But yeah, you have to kind of make do.
Right. Now, Jim, for all of your pitching and your terrible hitting, you also joined the Chris Berman nickname club. And I'm wondering if you remember Chris Berman, who had the greatest nicknames ever for players, Bert B. Home, Bly Levin. You remember yours, of course, right?
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah. Jim, two silhouettes on the shades. Yeah, on the Deshaies, based on the Herman's Hermits tune. Two silhouettes on the shades.
Right.
Yeah, that was a reach. We didn't.
Most of them were, Jim, but I love that
Yes.
one.
Yeah, that was the next level. And so People Magazine did an article on Chris and his nicknames, and at the time they asked him to list his top 5 or 10 or whatever it was, and he listed that one among them. Um, and my wife was like, "Hey, you made People Magazine." And I was like, "Well, Chris actually made People Magazine. The story's about him. My name just happens to be in there." And it's like, that she was more fired up about that than had I been on the cover of SI or something. Like, look at that, you're a crossover sensation.
But Jim, that was kind of an honor to be in the top 10 of Chris Berman's nicknames. He had 1,000 of them,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, and I still every now and then people will refer to it. People of a certain generation remember will refer to me as two silhouettes.
Right. Oh, really? They
Yeah.
still do after all
Yeah,
this time.
yeah. People will still, bring it up anyway.
Jeff, Boomer was famous. Mike Aldretti was Mike. Enough Aldretti was his nickname. there were
Rick Innocent Lysander, right? Oh, to be young again, McDowell.
Yes. Oh, there were so many good ones. Oh gosh. So
Wasn't there one that was like innocent until proven? Oh gosh, who was it?
Bernard Gilkey.
Bernard
Yes.
Gilkey.
Innocent until proven guilty. Very good, Jeff.
Yeah.
You're way too young to remember that. Bernard Gilkey almost hit 50 doubles one year. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah, the internet is a beautiful thing where it brings up stuff like that. Now, Jim, obviously we're talking broadcasters. You are a broadcaster with former guests of the show and dear friend of ours, Boog Sciambi. You guys get to do these games together. Tell us, I think the art of calling a game and the relationship, as a radio guy myself, not a baseball play-by-play guy, but that relationship is so important, and there's so much time spent together. There's so many conversations that go in different directions. What is it like being in the booth, the two of you together?
Yeah, it's a dream. I mean, he's really easy to work with. We have the same sensibility, when it comes to the game. We're into the modern analytics. We like to have fun. We like to play around, probably more so than some people would like. I imagine if there's people grousing about our show, we go off the rails probably a little more than they would like. But it's who we are. and it's always been my position, and I think you guys would agree. We play 162 games, so this isn't football, and a lot of goofy things happen, and so we're trying to create an atmosphere where we're drawing people into our world, and we're sharing. It'd be like if you're hanging out with some buddies watching the game. There are times when you're going to be locked in on the action because that's what's captivating you, and there are times you're going to be spitballing about something else that's going on over here because at that particular point the game isn't all that exciting. So you speak to so many different masters, right? People they want to hear the modern analytics, they don't want to hear it. They want you to goof around, they don't want you to goof around. So all you can really do is just be yourself and hope it's good enough for most of the people.
Right. And one time you went off the rails, Jim. You're going to have to fill in a bunch of blanks here. But Jeff, this was 2021. And I hope I got this right. Boog is doing the game and Jim's sitting right next to him. And Boog goes like this, And Jim says, what? And Boog says, Ryan Tepera, pitcher for the Cubs, he looks like someone. Take it from here, Jim. What happened then?
Yeah, so they get a tight shot of Ryan, and I go, kind of looks like my cousin Randy. And Boog lost his mind. It just hit him. It just tickled him. And he did. In that moment, anyway, the shot we had of him, he looked a lot like my cousin Randy. He was, grew up in Messina, New York, a year older than me. And yeah, that's just sometimes there's stuff that comes into the head and you don't filter and it comes out. And like later on at night, you're going to bed, you go, did I really say that? Did I really choose to sing at that point in the telecast? You go, what an idiot. But yeah, I mean, I'd rather swing and miss a few times, trying to have fun, than just play it straight down the line. But Boog's such a great partner because he loves to laugh and he gets it.
Jim, you're in good company because swinging and missing is what our podcast is all about. We take swings and jokes all the time.
Right. Well, we have more stretches here than Willie McCovey. Believe me, Jim. Yeah. But didn't you say about Ryan Tepera, he's got a better slider than my cousin Randy?
Yes. yeah. Randy didn't have much of a slider.
That's so good. So I remember Boog telling me a couple years later, he goes to do a basketball game and Matt Painter is there. Matt Painter does broadcasting and Matt comes up to him and goes, look, I'm like the biggest Cubs fan in the world. I'm legit. And he says to Boog, I know who cousin Randy is.
Yeah.
So Jim, did cousin Randy talk to you about all this, that you kind of made him famous just because he looked like Ryan Tepera?
I think I've probably seen cousin Randy once since then, and it didn't come up. And I have no idea if cousin Randy is aware of the impact that he had on our broadcast. He people back then, I'm sure somebody has mentioned it to him, but I've never heard.
All right. Well, before we get to the final part of this, just tell us about the Cubs, Jim, and what you've seen this year. I mean, they're a pretty darn good team. Just give us a quick scouting report on what you're seeing from the Cubs.
Yeah, it's been really impressive. Scoring a ton of runs. The schedule early on was really tough. A lot of Dodgers, Padres, Diamondbacks. When the season started, I was kind of the mind, if this team is 500 at the end of April, bully for them. And they've far outplayed that. They went up against that tough schedule and played very well. Despite injuries to Justin Steele, who's done for the year, Shodi Managa, who's out right now. Ian Happ's got a little big thing, but I think he'll be back soon. The starting pitching has been really good. The bullpen has kind of had to fight through some issues, but the lineup is dynamic. They steal a bunch of bases, they hit home runs, they slug, they walk. Pete Crow Armstrong has been unbelievable. Kyle Tucker has been in a little bit of a funk here for the last 2-3 weeks, but he started lights out. Was one of the best players in the league for an extended period of time. So and they'll continue to score. There's no doubt in my mind they'll be one of the higher scoring teams in the league when all is said and done. And if they can avoid any more big injuries to their pitching staff, they're going to be in great shape.
And Jeff, my favorite baseball name is on the Cubs. Do you want to explain that to Jim Deshaies so he can learn something from us?
Carson Kelly is my dad's favorite name. Can't say favorite player, can't play favorites here, but his grandson, he's 3 grandkids. The very first one named Carson, and my sister, my dad's daughter, Carson's mom is Kelly. Carson Kelly.
Oh, wow. So that's an easy one.
Right.
Yeah, he has to
So
be
Carson Kelly
your
hit for
favorite
the
name.
cycle out of the 9 spot this year. First
Yeah.
guy to ever do that in the month of March. And then he had a couple of other amazing games. This is what tickles me. Every time I see Carson Kelly have a big day, I'm thinking, well,
Yeah, he's been unbelievable too. He's a 30-year-old player, so there's a track record of who he is as a player, and all of a sudden he's turned into, Albert Pujols at the plate. It's
but
unbelievable what
Jim,
he's doing.
isn't this the beauty of baseball, all kidding aside, that the light seems to have gone on for him after 10 years in the league and age 30, that he's doing things he's never done before? Is that not one of the great beauties of baseball?
Right, and it's contrary to what we always say, right? We always say, well, the back of the baseball card is going to show up. Usually, we say it when a player's scuffling, and we know him to be a good player. That sooner or later the numbers are going to be there, and that does hold true most of the time. But what makes the game so much fun is it doesn't happen all the
Right.
time. There are outliers. Guys figure something out, or the way they're used. They get on a roll, they get locked in mentally, whatever it is. Guys have outlier seasons, and to win a championship you need that. But it is one of the really fun things about baseball. um, and that's the other thing too, is when you play 162 games, you have to have a bit of humor, right? You have to be able to roll with the ups and the downs. And I was thinking about this the other day. In our sport, when you're getting beat 18-2 in the ninth inning, you're going to bring in an outfielder to pitch, and everybody on your team is going to have a belly laugh watching him pitch, even though you're getting your butt kicked. Now, can you imagine a football game where you're getting beat, 63-7? Hey, let's take the center and put him at quarterback, and that'll be a riot. And the coaches over there with the headset on is going to be yucking it up, and it's only baseball that
But Jim,
happens.
well, I mean, if Garo Yepremian suddenly was put in as the quarterback, I mean, that it's just not going to look right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just, yeah. And I think that's the beauty of the game. The everyday opportunity for nonsense is one of the great things about the game.
Yes.
And then you have games like that, Jim, and then you have games like Game 7 of the World Series in Cleveland.
I was there watching the game, and yeah, you ride the highs and lows. And the interesting story from that game, I was in a suite with some people from the Cubs front office, my wife and I, and there was a lot. We ate the lucky cake before the game, and there was obviously a lot of excitement. And then Cleveland takes the lead. We have the rain delay. Theo Epstein had been sitting in the stands watching the game from behind home plate. Theo comes into the box we were in. Nobody wanted to talk to Theo. It was like there was so much tension. Everybody's like, when you don't want to get called on by the teacher, he came in, he was fuming, and nobody's trying. No, we're all trying to not make eye contact with him. But thank God things ended
Right.
well.
Well, Jim, we could keep you all day, but we have to leave with, since we started with the Andy Griffith Show, and since we have a Team Tim during every broadcast that we do, you saw the All Pope team. Apparently, you got a kick out of that.
Good work on
so
that.
in
Good
your honor and in honor of Hal Smith, Otis the Drunk, I came up with the All-Andy Griffith Show team from major leaguers, using their first names only because that's how they're always identified in the show. So we'll start out in the outfield, of course, with Otis Nixon after Otis the Drunk. We have Andy Van Slyke after Andy Taylor, Sheriff Andy Taylor. And by the way, a few years ago in the playoffs, Jim, that guy Sheriff, the pitcher Sheriff, faced Chris Taylor. So we had a Sheriff
Taylor match
at bat, which tickled me to know. Ryan Sheriff against Chris Taylor. And our third outfielder is John Mayberry Jr.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
We've got the city. Our catcher is Emmett Rogers. Jeff Emmett Clark was the fix-it guy. I couldn't find, Jim, anyone named Goober who played in the major leagues. So I pivoted to Gomer Hodge after Gomer Pyle, who was Goober's cousin. Am I doing okay so far?
Yeah, Gomer. Yeah, he helped Goober out down at Wally's filling station. Yeah. And then they spun off the Gomer Pyle show off
Right.
of
The
it. Yeah.
second baseman is Barney Koch. And by the way, Jim, I will never forgive former Cubs manager Dale Swaim, because Stephen Fife was pitching one day for the Dodgers, and he was pitching against the Cubs at Wrigley. And yes,
Darwin.
and for some reason, Dale Swaim gave Darwin Barney the day off, preventing the greatest batter-pitcher matchup ever, the Barney Fife matchup. I've been waiting my whole life for this, and he decided to give Darwin Barney a rest. How could he do that?
Yeah. I would have gone into, if I'd known that, I would have gone into the office and mentioned that. I don't know if Dale was in the mood to take any advice as to what his lineup should be. But so, I don't want to interrupt your flow in Mayberry, but one of the highlights of my broadcasting career was in the Astrodome early on in my career. We were playing the Reds, and I think Jack McKeon was the manager, and he had an outfield of Dimitri Young, Michael Franks, and Chris Steins. He had the Young, Frank, and Steins outfield. And when I was writing on my lineup that day, I was like, this is the greatest moment in the history of the sport. This will never be surpassed.
I cannot believe I got scooped by a left-handed pitcher, Jim. Those are the things I die to recognize. Young Frankenstein. Oh my gosh, that is.
Yeah, it was magic. And there's no way Jack. Right?
Of course not.
Maybe it was.
These poor managers. Oh my gosh. Well, I can't complete the list, but I'm going to.
Who you got
all
on
right,
Mayberry?
so third baseman is Howard Johnson. Howard Sprague, of course, was the nerdy guy who worked in one of the front offices there. I really had trouble at shortstop, Jim. Ernest Riles is my shortstop. And get this, so Jeff, Ernest T. Bass is one of the great characters in the history of the Andy Griffith Show. And I kept looking for someone named Ernest in Major League history who had a middle initial T, and I couldn't find him. And Ernest Riles does not have a middle name. His name is Ernest Riles. And so from now on, he's going to have a middle name. It's going to be the letter T, so he can be Ernest T. Riles. And last, and this is the biggest stretches of all, Floyd Bannister is our pitcher, named after Floyd Lawson, the barber, who Jim loved because Floyd was a wildly underrated character. And this guy didn't play in the big leagues, but he pitched somewhere, I'm not sure where. Opie Pace was our pitcher after Opie Taylor. So, Jim, I heard Opie, I got such a kick out of this. I heard Ron Howard, who played Opie Taylor, talking on a talk show once. And they were asking him how much money he made as a child actor in the mid-'60s. And he looked it up. And one year, Opie Taylor made more money than Sandy Koufax.
Wow. That's amazing.
And Ron Howard was incredulous. He goes, I'm just a little kid playing Opie Taylor, and I'm making more money than the greatest pitcher of all time that we'd ever seen.
That's amazing.
Jim, this is what I do in my spare time. I come up with the All-Andy Griffith Show team.
Well, good pull on. I was wondering if you were going to get an Ernest T. Bass in there. Good pull on Ernest Riles.
We'll finish with this in that Buck Showalter loves the Andy Griffith Show more than anyone. And he knows each episode number, Jim. So if you say Citizen's Arrest, that one, he'll go, oh, that was episode 112. That's how well he knows that show. So good.
It's amazing. Yeah. I knew Buck was a big fan.
It's so good. But Buck Showalter did not get join the Andy of Mayberry fan club with Aunt B presenting him a cookbook with a Barney Fife impersonator standing right there on the field of the Astrodome. Only Jim Deshaies got that.
Magical moment.
This was so great. Thank you for taking your time to be a part of our family, as we say. So, thank you again. This was a blast.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And by the way, the Dolphins of Lemoyne almost took Syracuse down in basketball.
That's right.
Thanks for bringing up such an unpleasant subject.
Yeah, but I got and I'm a huge SU fan though. Right. So yeah, I'm a big
Jim,
SU fan.
We had Jim Boeheim on the podcast in April, and he could not have been funnier more charming when we talked about golf, we talked about baseball, we talked about basketball. He grew up loving the Milwaukee Braves. Hank Aaron was his guy. Warren Spahn was his guy. Sandy Koufax was his guy, even though Opie Taylor made more money than he did in 1965.
Yeah. A lot of guys of that generation, right? Basketball guys were huge baseball fans.
It was just so nice to meet a basketball guy and recognize he had such a wonderful love of baseball also. That's because, of course, Jim, it's the greatest game in the world, as we know.
That's right. Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for making us laugh so many times.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys.
Thank you to Jim Deshaies for being our excellent, hilarious guest today on Is This a Great Game or What? He's fantastic, Dad. Everything you had told me fit as advertised. You hit the nail on the head when you told me how great he was going to be.
And Jeff, I will never watch the movie Young Frankenstein again without thinking about Jim Deshaies, one of the funniest movies ever. And Jim Deshaies made it even funnier with the story that he told.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Share the podcast with a friend. And as always, thank you for being a part of our family.